Hello everyone, with you as always TimFilm, and in this video, we're going to take apart the movie Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 3. It's a very interesting movie, and it really impressed me, so enjoy the movie and here we go. Funding for Schaefer Ellis is provided by Surfshark Pontoon into the end to find out about their amazing service, so anyone who knows me knows that I've kinda sorta parted ways with the MCU. I made a whole video about why in case you missed it, but the bottom line is I kinda think it's over for this universe. But there was one exception, one more MCU thing that I was looking forward to because I knew there was very little chance of it being disappointing. Actually, that's not even true because after how massively disappointing Thor and Thunder was, despite my love for Taika's earlier work, I was a little worried about whether or not James Gunn could pull off a satisfying finale for the Guardians in this new, aggressively middle MCU. Well, don't I feel silly? Because yeah, Guardians 3 was phenomenal, easily one of the top 3 best movies in the entire MCU. Like Infinity War is my number 1 and Guardians 2 and 3 are in the next 2 slides. It's too early for me to say which one is better. Oh, and Guardians 1 is my number 4 best MCU movie, basically if the Guardians are in. That's enough talking about the Shrek, the third of the MCU. Yeah, it might actually be that bad in hindsight, but I don't want to re-watch it to find out. Let's talk about GUI now. James Gunn's writing is the best for these characters, and much like the first 2 films, he really shines here. Everyone is funny, of course, but the characters are also explored in such a compelling way, and you kind of forget how much depth they all have when it's over. It's been 6 years since we got a feature film starring them, and I like how this movie picks up on the crumb of Gamora's character left behind by Infinity War and Endgame. She lost 2 whole movies worth of development, and I like how this movie goes to great lengths to show that things just aren't the same with her. I think Peter's going to accept that serves as a strong character arc that still leaves room for fun interactions between the two of them. Conceptually, it's a really fun idea to have Gamora be the unhinged, murderous, happy one in the group, while Nebula is the one who gets to do it. One of the group, while Nebula is more level-headed. Speaking of which, Nebula is great in this movie. I always felt like in the Thanos duology, Infinity War was Gamora's movie, while Endgame was Nebula's movie. That was where she finally got to come into her own as a real hero. The problem is that she did it with those lame-ass Avengers and not the certified cool-ass Guardians. This is the first movie where she's part of the Guardian team from the beginning, and it's so nice to see their actual dynamic as allies. I like how much she cares about Rocket and appreciates the cybernetic enhancements he gave her. I like how she frequently butts heads with Mantis. I like it when she interacts with Drax. Actually, scratch that. I like it when anyone interacts with Drax. It's comedy gold. Drax and Mantis are their usual super fun selves. Groot, who's always kind of felt like an auxiliary member of the group since the first movie, it still kind of felt like that, but he got some really cool new abilities that I wasn't expecting. And Rocket, oh you sweet, sweet raccoon boy. I think everyone can see that even though Chris Pratt gets the most screen time in these movies, Rocket has always been the heart and soul of the team. And the second movie did a really good job of showing that his unlikable traits stem from insecurity about whether he even deserves to have friends. And the third movie gives us so much more insight into how horrible his creation was and how hard it must be for him to befriend anyone. It makes you think about how meaningful the events of these movies have been for him as he searches for meaning in the wake of that. The frequent flashbacks we get for his character are devastating and often brutal in a way that truly earns the PG-13 rating. As this movie is to PG-13 what Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is to PG. Kids will be scared and parents will complain, though this is not the fault of the movie and is entirely the fault of how skewed the movie rating scale is. Speaking of PG-13, this movie is also the first in the MCU to ever use the F word, and it is not even for an impactful moment or something. It's just for a joke, and knowing that made the joke where it showed up 10 times funnier for me. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, you're welcome. The joke will now be 10 times funnier for you anyway. Back to serious. Rocket's story is one of the saddest aspects of the entire MCU, and it's compounded by what an absolutely vile villain his creator is. We all hate Ego for that one reveal in Guardians 2, but you know, he has some depth. He has some remorse. Yeah, no, the high evolutionary one. Okay, hold on. Did you remember to subscribe to the channel? Oh, yeah, and like it, and now we can move on. One of the best comic book villains I've seen in a long time. It's interesting to see the trend of terrible father figures in guns that you can see in Guardians 2 and Peacemaker reach its natural apex with a character who is technically Rocket's father, but who created him out of pure selfishness and malice and sees him only as a mistake, the verbal abuse. And then, there's the corporate aspect of this villain, which, if you don't know, James Gunn was originally fired from this movie in bad faith because some Rondo right-wingers showed Disney, hey look, he made edgy jokes on Twitter in 2009, go fire him, and then Disney did that, which ultimately ended up leading to him directing the Suicide Squad, which was so good that he's now in charge of all of DC, so that kind of backfired on him, huh? Anyway, Disney eventually reversed their decision and brought him back, but watching this movie it kind of feels like he kind of resents the company a little bit for that, because honestly, this is probably one of the most anti-Disney movies I've ever seen, and it's kind of crazy that it exists under their umbrella. There's obviously a lot at play here with a high evolutionary, but think about how this guy owns a company with complete control over all these IP, as the movie refers to them that he has a firm grip on how he seems obsessed with creating a perfect version of Earth that lacks all the negativity of his own life. Think about how Disney loves to put talking animals in movies, and this guy creates talking animals in an incredibly horrible, gruesome process. At one point, he says he needs Rocket's brain because it's the only brain with new ideas, since all of his other test subjects are just repeating the same ideas over and over again. The fact that Rocket is what makes him successful, and without Rocket, he can't replicate that success. There might have been a few other things that I'll catch on my second viewing, but regardless, I thought it was a fun, cheeky allegory for a villain with a lot of decidedly unfunny aspects to his character. I haven't seen anyone else comment on how anti-Disney he is, so maybe it's just me, but thankfully he has so much going for him as a villain outside of this allegory, in an excellent performance, a strong personal connection to one of the heroes, and a sadistic and sick evil plan. Do I have any issues with this movie? Well, one thing that struck me for the first 30 minutes or so was the editing. I don't know, there were a lot of quick cuts, and they don't always make sense. A character can say a sentence, and then in the middle it just cuts to a completely different angle of them still saying that sentence. I think there was a scene where Peter and Mantis were arguing, and it suddenly just cut to life. Drax's reaction, even though seeing his reaction wasn't really relevant to the argument at all. I don't know, it stuck out to me at first, but the problem gradually faded as the movie went on. Thankfully, there's also a lot going on, as you can imagine, and while the story is always relatively focused, it can feel like there are a little too many characters by the end. Tonal whiplash has always been a problem for these Guardians movies and James Gunn's writing in general, and you can feel that here. Sometimes you're not done laughing at a pretty funny joke before oops, we're back in Rocket's backstory. Oh, I guess we have to stop laughing now. There was a pretty funny reference to that thing, but I think I would have found it a lot funnier if it didn't happen during an otherwise dramatic moment. But like, I don't really come to these Guardians movies for perfection. I come to see these flawed and endearing characters find a family together and protect the galaxy. The movie is pretty long, which I could call a flaw. But honestly, I just didn't want my time with these wonderful characters to end, especially since I knew this was probably the last time we would see them all together, at least according to many of the cast members and James Gunn, who now has a whole superhero universe to run. I'm so glad he got to give them this amazing send-off that pretty much completely lived up to my expectations. Instead of trying to introduce 15 new plot points and characters into the larger MCU, it serves as a beautiful conclusion that really runs with the themes of change and finding your place in the vast cosmos. I think with this charming, deeply personal, stellar conclusion out of the way, I'm ready to move on from anticipating MCU projects. Check out some every now and then if they interest me, but much like Endgame, this one really feels like the end of an era and like it's time to move on, but I'm insanely grateful for all of it. The memory of the best trilogy in comic book movie history gave me the last shot of this movie in particular, not counting the post-credit scenes, absolutely perfect and just right to end Guardians of the Galaxy on a 9 out of 10. Thank you for watching this episode to the end. Write your opinion about the movie in the comments and see you in the next video.